There are places that wear their history proudly, and then there are places that quietly hide it behind beautiful facades. Milledgeville, Georgia is one of those places. At first glance, it's exactly what you'd expect from a former state capital. Grand homes, towering columns, brick streets, and churches that have watched generations come and go. But beneath all of that beauty is a story they don't usually put on the brochures. A governor who abandoned the city before an invading army arrived. Union soldiers who turned Georgia's capital into the site of one of the strangest moments of the Civil War. One of the largest psychiatric hospitals the world has ever known. And a quiet farm where one of America's greatest Southern writers transformed suffering into unforgettable stories. Today we're exploring historic Milledgeville, not just to admire what still stands, but to uncover what they're not telling you. Every capital city begins with a decision. In 1803, Georgia intentionally chose this spot to become its new seat of government. The state was expanding westward, and Savannah was simply too far east to effectively govern the growing population. So rather than allowing another town to slowly grow into importance, they designed one from scratch. Wide streets, public squares, government buildings placed with purpose. Everything about Milledgeville was carefully planned to project confidence and permanence. For 65 years, this was Georgia's political heart. Governors lived here, laws were written here. Major decisions that shaped the state happened inside these buildings. Walking these streets today, it's surprisingly easy to imagine horse-drawn carriages rolling past and legislators hurrying toward another heated debate. History doesn't always begin with dramatic moments. Sometimes it begins with someone unfolding a map and deciding, this is where we're going to build something important. Once the capital was established, Milledgeville flourished. Elegant homes appeared block after block. Businesses opened to support government workers. Churches, schools, hotels, and shops filled the growing city. In 1839, Georgia completed what many consider one of the finest examples of Greek Revival architecture in the country, the old governor's mansion. For decades, it wasn't simply someone's home. It was the center of Georgia's government. 8 governors lived there, entertained guests there, and made decisions that affected every corner of the state. Not far away stood the Capitol itself. Today it's home to Georgia Military College. But originally, this building represented the authority of an entire state. Milledgeville wasn't trying to become important. It already was. And for a time, everything seemed permanent. But history has a habit of reminding us that permanence is often an illusion. By 1864, the Civil War had reached Georgia. General William Tecumseh Sherman was marching toward the sea. Everyone knew Milledgeville was one of his objectives. Governor Joseph E. Brown knew it too. Rather than waiting for the Union Army to arrive, he gathered government records, valuables, and fled the city. When Sherman entered Milledgeville, there wasn't much resistance left. He used the governor's mansion as headquarters, though legend says he preferred sleeping on his own bedroll rather than in the governor's bed. Meanwhile, his soldiers found another way to entertain themselves. Inside Georgia's capital, Union troops staged a mock session of the Georgia legislature. Laughing, drinking, pretending to debate. Then they voted to repeal Georgia's secession from the Union. It was political theater, equal parts satire and humiliation. Eventually, the prank gave way to destruction. Documents were scattered, books destroyed, furniture damaged. The Capitol that had symbolized Georgia's power became a symbol of how quickly power can disappear. Just 4 years later, Atlanta became Georgia's new capital. Milledgeville's greatest chapter had ended, or so it seemed, because another chapter, far stranger than politics, was only beginning. Our morning started after a night that really should have included more sleep. Instead, Dusty and I stayed up talking until around 2 in the morning. Some traditions are probably healthier than others. I woke up around 3:30 with pain, making it nearly impossible to get comfortable. Forgot to refill my prescriptions. The hotel pillows weren't helping. By 5:30, my brain had officially decided sleep was over anyway. So, bad key. 3.5 hours of sleep isn't exactly the recipe for a productive day. As I'm riding in the hotel room, a Charlie horse suddenly attacks Dusty's ankle. She bolts awake. I laugh. She probably didn't appreciate that as much as I did. Eventually, we headed downtown. The visitor center didn't open until 10 o'clock, so instead of waiting around, we parked behind it and started walking the historic district. The plan sounded simple enough. Walk half the tour, return to the visitor center, drive to the cemetery, come back for the second half, then finish the day at Georgia State Hospital. Simple, at least on paper. The weather had other ideas. 36 degrees. Wind whipping through every street. By Florida standards, that was Arctic. We kept our heads down and walked anyway. By the time we finished the first section, we'd covered about 4.5 miles. Cold, hungry, feet already protesting. But honestly, historic towns reveal themselves differently when you're walking instead of driving. You notice architectural details you'd otherwise miss. Brick patterns, old staircases, weathered foundations. The little things become part of the story. Not everything went smoothly. We somehow never found the old Capitol Museum. We also struggled to locate McIntosh Street, which meant we probably missed several historic homes along the route. That's always frustrating, especially when you've planned everything so carefully. But that's part of real travel. Sometimes the map wins. Sometimes you simply keep moving and promise yourself you'll come back. When we finally reached the visitor center, there were no magnets, no doll pins, not much of anything really. Another small disappointment. Still, history isn't measured by what you bring home from the gift shop. Sometimes it's measured by sore feet and stories. By lunchtime, we were absolutely starving. It wasn't even noon yet, but between the cold weather and 4+ miles of walking, we were running on fumes. So we escaped into the China Walk buffet, warm food, warm building, warm everything. Honestly, it might have been the highlight of our circulation returning. After lunch, we tried visiting several of the historic buildings offering tours. Closed. Every one of them. The unusually cold weather had shut them down for the day. It would have been easy to get frustrated. Instead, we added another reason to come back. One thing we've learned doing Travel Made Personal is that incomplete trips aren't failures. They're invitations. Every place doesn't have to reveal all of its stories the first time you visit. Milledgeville eventually reinvented itself. Without the capital, without the political influence, many towns might have faded into obscurity. Instead, this city became known for something entirely different. Just outside town sits Andalusia Farm, where author Flannery O'Connor wrote stories that forever changed Southern literature while living with lupus. And across town, Central State Hospital expanded into one of the largest psychiatric institutions in the world. For generations, simply saying someone had been sent to Milledgeville carried enormous weight across Georgia. Thousands of lives intersected here, some marked by hope, others by heartbreak. Those stories deserve to be remembered too. Today, the governor's mansion has become a museum. The old Capitol serves Georgia Military College. Historic homes continue standing along quiet streets. And even the abandoned buildings at Central State Hospital still ask difficult questions about how we once cared for people society often chose not to understand. Milledgeville lost its title as Georgia's capital. It never lost its importance. It simply became important for different reasons. I think that's what surprised me most. Not the architecture, not even the Civil War history. It was realizing how many completely different stories exist within just a few square miles. Political ambition, military occupation, mental health, literature, faith, loss, preservation. It's all layered together. Places like this remind me that history isn't neat. It doesn't fit into a single chapter or a single museum. Every generation leaves something behind. Some leave monuments, some leave scars, some leave stories. And if we're willing to slow down enough to walk 4 miles through freezing wind, even when we miss a few buildings along the way, those stories are still waiting. Maybe that's what they're not telling you about Milledgeville. Not that it was once Georgia's capital. Not that Sherman marched through here. Not that Flannery O'Connor lived nearby. They're not telling you that this town refuses to be defined by any one chapter of its history. And that's exactly what makes it worth exploring. If you've ever visited Milledgeville, I'd love to hear what stories stood out most to you. And if there's a place whose history surprised you after you arrived, tell us about it down in the comments. We read every one of them. If you enjoy exploring the forgotten, the fascinating, and the stories hiding just beneath the surface, we'd love to have you join us on future adventures. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stop. Until next time, keep looking beyond the postcard, because sometimes the most meaningful stories are the ones nobody thinks to tell.